It's Alberto from Mo's Bros Reviews. Hope you guys are doing all right because tonight we're finally going to talk about it. We're finally going to talk about Total War Warhammer. So before we get into the game, I just want to just tell you guys about how excited I was about this. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the tweets. You know, we're obviously very into Warhammer over here on Mo's Bros Reviews, but I've had an infatuation with both the 40K and the fantasy universes for God knows how long, for forever. I mean, I was enjoying these books and these universes before I even got into the tabletop games when I was in my mid-20s with Armando. But, you know, it's such a solid universe. You know, it's got, people always have the humor. I don't even see that much of the humor in it. You know, it's just a very, very well thought out. It's got 30 years of lore behind it. You know, it very blatantly and obviously takes a lot of good things from a lot of different sources. I personally don't have a problem with it because when it all comes together, it pays great homage to those sources without trampling all over them. This is just a great, awesome universe. You know, I mean, take a look at my desktop background right here. You know, this is the Storm of Chaos. They're battling out in front of Middenheim. You know, an amazing, you know, imperial city dating back to the beginning of the Empire under the rule of Sigmar. It's the city of the White Wolf. You know, and you can just see the brutality of the universe. You know, that's what I love about it. It's just it all revolves around that constant lore. I'm sure if any of you have read the Black Library novels, you see in the inside front cover, it just tells you the whole spiel about how both in 40K and in the fantasy world, it's just all about war. There's just always war. It's always chaos, and everybody's just trying to get their slice. In any case, you know, just on that note, you know, in preparation for this game, I've been beefing up on my Warhammer lore. As you can see back here, I'm obviously a fan. These are some of my better painted models from 40K. You know, we got a nice siege tank, Space Marine Devastator. We've got a nice Predator over here with a little Space Marine captain there sticking his head out, right? And up here we got some individual Space Marines and of course the always popular disembodied Dreadnought. So moving on to what we're here for, which is Warhammer Total War. Let's cue up a little bit of a video here in the background so you guys can follow along while I'm talking. Just tell you straight up, it's awesome. It's exactly what I was hoping it would be. So, moving into that, again, this isn't going to be a full review. We're just going to talk about them briefly. You know, this is just going to be my first impression video. We'll have a full review later on after I finish at least one campaign. Hopefully two. I want to do at least two factions. But right here in this section of the campaign, I'm invading Marienburg. It's kind of an overpowered battle, but that's okay. I'm doing this one more for the lore, and that's something that if you love Warhammer, you're going to run into this a lot. You're just going to do things that you've always wanted to see happen in the lore, in the books, in the game. And this game is perfect for that. I mean, I've even thought sometimes like, God, you know, this is such a great alternative. If you can't afford to spend $200, $300, $400 on a great and countless hours painting and creating a great fantasy tabletop army, this is your alternative right here because it looks beautiful. The graphics are great. You know, all the best factions are here, and we all know that, you know, Creative Assembly, they're kind of dicks when it comes to the DLC program and charging you $3 here for a legendary hero and you know, blackmailing you through the opening promotion stuff. But right now, I just don't care because the factions for the first time in Total War are just so dynamically different. They're not the same at all. They don't have the same mechanics. They're all, I mean, it's almost like taking different factions from different Total War games and putting them together is how much diversity you see. And to me, having four or if you pre-order it and get the Chaos Warriors, in that case 5 factions that are as different and diverse and play as mechanically different as all these do, that's so much better for me than having, you know, 20 factions, half of which concentrate on, you know, ranged attacks, while the other half are just cavalry based. You know, come on, this is so much better than that. And the universe is ripe with lore and other factions that I'm sure we're going to see over the history of this game. Which, by the way, I think it's important to mention is the first in the trilogy. So anyway, check out the campaign map at first glance. You know, it looks great. It's huge. You know, it captures the old world in its entirety. It's very faithful. You know, it's very faithful to the Warhammer brand. And that's something that bears mentioning, even just seeing here from the campaign map perspective. This game brings the old world of Warhammer Fantasy to life in front of your eyes. You know, in the same way that Rome 2, you felt like you were controlling events, you know, 2,000 years ago in the Mediterranean, and before that, you know, Shogun 2, you know, the more modern games, they just felt like the graphics finally came to a point where you could really get in these games and you could really feel like you were manipulating history from, you know, an Olympian point of view. This game does the same thing, but to the Warhammer world, and it's just fantastic. Everything's about it. It oozes the ambiance of Warhammer, the feel of it. you know, and it's very faithful to it. You know, here we have the Empire. You can see the dark forest of the Dracwall. You know, all the city names are appropriate. I mean, at one point I even pulled out a map of the old world, like a really high def when I printed off the internet, and held up to this campaign map. And you could find so many obscure settlements and tribes. It was great. You know, these guys, the folks at Creative Assembly, whatever the team was behind this game, they just absolutely did their homework, and it feels great. This world has come to life in a great way. You know, so anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. We're moving into the battle of Siege of Marienburg. Again, kind of overpowered here, kind of OP, but it's okay because I mainly just wanted to see Marienburg. And here's another reason why this was just so far to me. I'm probably gonna have to agree with a lot of people that this is the best Total War game thus far. So for the first time, you know, you can look at the cities and they are just fantastic. They're artfully done. They're huge. They stretch to the horizon. You know, gone are the days of Total War where you played as Rome and you were battling Carthage and it still just felt like a little tabletop model you were messing around with. No, these cities, I mean, you'll see here, at the beginning of this battle, I just actually just took some time to just cruise around and check out the city of Marienburg. You know, the city of Marienburg obviously being a big part of the lore of the old world of the Empire of Man. You know, they're a powerful city-state that breaks away and have great trade ties and a naval fleet, and they can kind of really hold their own. You know, it's great. So, you know, it felt really good coming in here with my right clan troops under Karl Franz and just absolutely destroying this place. But as you guys just saw, you know, it stretches to the background. The aqueducts are all there, and it all just has that great Germanic Warhammer feel. You know, even down to the greatest Warhammer icon I think of all human factions is I mean that gigantic Imperial skull and just about everything. It's much more prolific in 40K, but it's definitely still exists in this universe. But here, we'll go ahead and fast forward a little bit to the exciting parts of the siege. You know, all the basic Total War mechanics are here. You know, none of that's been lost. But from what I've seen so far, the game has been streamlined somewhat to make it easier to get into, and the campaign is moving at a much faster pace than I'm accustomed to. I felt like in the Rome 2 campaign, that thing dragged out for forever. I mean, you could just play like I didn't keep track of the turns, but it felt very long. Like you were very much plodding through the long course of history through the Roman Empire, or whatever faction you happen to be. This one's much faster. There's not a date that's kept anywhere. You know, you're given an era. This takes place in about 2500 of the Imperial calendar by the Warhammer Reckoning, so it's very up to date with the lore. But there's not, you know, you're not keeping seasons in the campaign game. There's not like a frosty winter that you have to deal with. You know, there's not characters dying about old age, and that to me is actually it's obviously meant to streamline this game and make it quicker to get into and more appealing to a lot of different players. I miss that. I like having those long, drawn-out campaign games, you know, where you deal with the seasons, and your army's stuck in the mountains during the cold, and they gotta, you know, they just lose people from attrition or whatever, and all these, you know, all these great scenarios that's gonna play out with your men across the field, and you get a little attached to it. This one, you know, it doesn't really have those aspects. You know, there's no seasons, people don't age. You know, I like that complexity, you know, but there is an upside to that. Is the game moves at a much faster pace. You know, and it is much easier to get into. Excuse me, Cortana, I'm trying to do a video here. Anyway, so, and that's good, and it's going to bring a lot of players into it. You know, you can just dive right in. The campaign moves around very speedily, and as big as that map is, which to me it seems almost as big as the map in Rome 2, it's very dense, and there's a lot of factions, which was another fear I had going into this, was that I was afraid they weren't going to be able to do, you know, maybe that much with the limited number of factions that are presented in universe style. But they did. I mean, geez, you know, just early in the campaign, I'm dealing with like 5 different dwarf factions, you know, a couple human ones, all the different city-states. Even the vampire counts have a couple factions, and chaos just showed up. So there's you know, plenty on your plate. But no, they did good. You know, they brought this whole thing full circle with Total War and melding with the fantasy setting. It looks like a match made in heaven. Honestly, it's been so much damn fun that I had a hard time getting away from it just to make this video. You know, as you can see here, it's it's a blast. You know, and I haven't even started fighting the enemies yet. You know, I'm still just trying to take over the Empire. But anyway, oh here, this is great. Oh, that's another thing I mentioned. Now the heroes in this game are now like powerful lords and battle wizards, and they actually make a big difference in the individual battles. They can launch spells across the map. They can take out, you know, whole contingents of troops. But at the same time, they're not so ridiculously overpowered that having one that's better than the other is necessarily ever gonna, you know, blatantly swing the tide of battle in any one direction or the other. But having said that, I think I've taken enough of your time for tonight. I'm gonna get back to my Empire campaign, and then I'll be checking out the dwarfs. Keep an eye on Twitch and YouTube. I'll be loading up some more videos, and stay tuned. In the weeks to come, I'll be doing a full review of this game, and we'll really get into the nitty gritty about what makes this stand apart and kind of what brings it back down a little bit. So anyway, it's been a pleasure. Have a good night. Anyway, on top of that, we got the Black Library books here. We have Thunder and Steel. This is probably the best, in my opinion, of the Black Library. If you ever get a chance to read anything by Dan Abnett, read it because it's all fantastic. But if you're gonna read Warhammer or just fantasy in general, I sincerely, and Armando would agree with me on this, I think you should grab Thunder and Steel by Dan Abnett. It's the best series. I've got the Warhammer 7th edition rulebook. Again, if you're into fantasy lore and just love that stuff, or even history, grab this thing because I mean, as you can see, it's just terrific. It's got everything you can want. I spend hours and hours just browsing through this book. It's all about the hobby and it's all about the lore. It's everything you need to know. It's great. And then and finally, of course, I've got my Empire rulebook. That's my side of choice when it comes to Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And again, I don't know if you've ever gotten into Warhammer, but you should at least pick up some of these books because they're just so damn fun to read. I love them. Anyway.